right, time for another Rantzerker. Rantzerker number 19, Gloria's Blackface Jive.
You know
what, yeah. This is, as always, is Alison Demon, and with me is Karen Strawn, Girl Writes What?
Yes.
And we're going to do a countdown to see how quickly it takes a wealthy, well-connected white woman to compare her struggles to that of a black people.
Or any other minority. Okay.
Yes.
But just remember, kids, cultural appropriation is wrong.
Unless you're, a wealthy, white, well-connected, politically connected woman, in which case your struggles are exactly the same as every minority group across the planet. And you can speak for them because reasons.
Yeah, because you know what they're going through. Because you've been going through it yourself, with your, oh my God, like every time I look at this woman, and she used to be really, really attractive. Okay, because I'm just looking at the still screen. You guys can all see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every time I look at this woman, I think, okay, well, I have these, right? They're from like frowning in concentration or even being mad. And I'm going to have these soon, right? And they're from also frowning and stuff like that. But you know what? I have lines here, right? I have lines here and they'll get deeper. And I have lines here and here. And they'll get deeper too. And you know what those lines are? Those are smile lines. And she doesn't have, I mean, she looks quite haggard. She looks quite wrinkled, right? And
But no smile lines.
She doesn't have any fucking smile lines. This is a woman who has no smile lines on her face.
Yeah. Somehow, I guess all those times, it's like men tell women to smile, so she's smashing the patriarchy by displaying no actual happiness whatsoever.
Yeah, no, she just seems like just her expression through this entire interview seems like completely joyless and humorless. She just, I have this feeling that she's just a deeply unhappy person. Anyhow, let's get started. On that note, we'll see if she has any joy in her.
Gloria Steinem, let's start where the book starts, with that dedication to the London.
Oh my God, she cracked a smile.
Yeah, but it doesn't. Well, let's see the smile. Stop it with the smile.
That's still a smile. That's still her. That's.
Yeah, but it's not actually a real smile. Unless she's had serious Botox underneath her eyes.
Yeah, her eyes are still like really dead.
I mean, all you have to do is put your hand over her and she still looks like she's about to kill, like she looks like a fucking lizard about to kill a mouse.
Yeah, no, you just keep her mouth covered and she still looks like she's frowning.
Yes, well, or she's seriously on some serious, like intense, tranquilizers or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she still doesn't seem joyless. It seems more like this is a perfunctory expression that I need to give at this moment because it is socially appropriate.
London physician. 60 years later, abortion rights across the world are being curtailed. Do you feel thwarted by that?
I would have.
What are they? Okay, all right. Okay, I have to ask. Is she on Mars? That delay is intense.
No, she's in New York, and the studio is in London, I'm assuming, right? BBC4.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a lot of lag, and the lag is going both directions. So it takes a while for Gloria here to have the feed going into her ear to actually hear the question. And then maybe she's at the point where, due to age, she's not quite as quick responding, and which I don't think is a problem. I think that's perfectly natural and ordinary and forgivable. But it's definitely a lag that goes both ways.
Iran
Okay, but just step. I need to explain to people what the sounds are in my kitchen. My husband is once again making lunch, so that's what the sounds are.
He's subordinating himself.
No, it's not supporting
on your behalf.
Really?
He is performing domestic services for free.
Okay.
That benefit and privilege you.
Well, I guess I'm a matriarchal shitlord then.
I think you are.
All right.
Moving on.
Felt thwarted earlier on because now we have the vast majority in favor of reproductive freedom. But I've come to understand in the interim that controlling reproduction and therefore women's bodies is.
Okay, wait.
Okay, well, okay, she says the vast majority is. Okay, let me go back and listen to this.
Felt thwarted earlier on because now we have the vast majority in favor of reproductive freedom.
Okay, reproductive freedom, right? The vast majority of people are in favor of reproductive freedom. That means they're in favor of contraception. They're in favor of, solid sex education. They're in favor of women being able to make choices about their bodies and whether or not they consent to get pregnant every time that they have sex and things like that. But I don't know whether the vast majority of people are like gung-ho about abortion, right? Like, I know that the majority of people probably look at it like better that than the opposite, right? But I don't think they think of it. I think the majority of people probably still think of it as an unfortunate thing that should be avoided if at all possible, right? Which is why so many people who are even pro-life are still pro-birth control. They're still they may be pro-abstinence, but they're also pro-safe sex and all of this other stuff. And it's why a huge segment of people who are even pro-abortion are still in favor of limits placed on it, like no aborting a child a week before its due date. It's a much more nuanced issue than like the majority of people are totally 100%, rooting for an abortion flex to be built, like in that Onion article.
And can I actually point something out? Gloria. You realize that if men got pregnant, abortion would be illegal all over the world. In fact, if men got pregnant, they would probably be drafted to give birth if the government felt like the population was going underneath a certain number, because men's bodies are considered product or property of the state in general. So I find it hilarious that she's talking about this being about controlling women's bodies. No, actually, reproduction, as far as I can tell, takes both of the two sapient species on this planet to come together and create a life, a human life. And one of them has zero. Oh, well, near zero. Actually, no. I think at the point where men can be raped and still be expected to be held responsible for the resultant offspring of them being raped, I would say that they have zero reproductive rights. Zero. And yet,
when that doctor who was dating that other doctor and he made it abundantly clear that he didn't want to have children until he was married, and so therefore he was not going to engage in any sex that could possibly result in having a child. So not even with a condom, not even with contraception am I going to have vaginal sex with you. What did this female doctor do? She retrieved his sperm from oral sex and impregnated herself and managed to get child support from him.
Yeah. Men have no reproductive rights. None.
No, absolutely none.
And if men, like I said, if men got pregnant, it wouldn't just be an issue of making abortion illegal. Men would be forced to get pregnant and give birth whenever the government decided it wanted them to. It would be the handmaiden's tale. It would be the handman's tale.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the handmaiden's tale actually it represents this obsession that feminists have with even the like they seem to be so obsessed with this. It's the whole controlling women's bodies thing. That's all they want to talk about.
Yeah. It does seem like an obsession, which is really ironic since women are the only ones who ever got citizenship without being essentially state slaves and having the state have a final decision over their futures and what their bodies would do. Yeah. They're the only group of people who'd ever had that. Ever.
So, good grief. All right, continue.
To understand in the interim that controlling reproduction and therefore women's bodies is
No. Reproduction takes both men and women.
Yeah.
You have to talk about how she's saying that controlling reproduction is equal to controlling women's bodies. What about the men in the equation?
Because no. Here's the thing, okay? Because here's how society worked until feminism came along, is that women were kept in like compounds, right? And they were impregnated like the female horses that are kept pregnant constantly, right? Constantly their whole lives until they die of just being kept pregnant and having their urine harvested. Okay. They're kept in these little stalls, right? Pregnant all the time, harvesting their urine to retrieve the estrogen to treat the menopausal symptoms of women Gloria Steinem's age.
Okay. So obviously this is bullshit. Look, I don't know who can you blame for the fact that women get pregnant, because it seems like the feminists are just in a war with human nature, or just biology.
Yep.
The fact that they'll never forgive men for the fact
that they don't get pregnant,
that women get pregnant. They'll never forgive men for the fact that they don't gestate.
Yeah.
You'll never forgive them, will you? Never. We'll fucking take this gripe to our graves. Why is it that we gestate and you don't? Fuck.
What I find interesting about Steinem and her obsession with this is that, to my knowledge, she's never had a child.
Well, geez.
Somehow managed to navigate through this patriarchal culture without ever being forced by the patriarchy to reproduce against her will.
And she never realizes that if she was George Steinem and George Steinem could get pregnant, there would be fucking pregnancy conscription.
Or that if she was George Steinem, right, that his choice was made the moment he ejaculated into a condom that he didn't put into an incinerator afterwards, into a woman's mouth, if she was mentally disordered and willing to go to those lengths, right? If he contracted with somebody and wrote a contract with them to donate his sperm, but didn't have a doctor acting as mediary, right? The moment he ejaculated, he lost his rights to his own DNA and therefore to his own wallet, to his own productivity, to his own wealth, to his own autonomy.
Yeah. I actually once did a calculation on how many men die on the job. And I actually think it's more men would actually die paying an 18-year or 21-year child support, paying off 18 to 21 years of child support. More men would die doing that than women would die giving birth.
Yeah, of course.
So think about that. And not only that, and that's just talking about death. Consider also all of the disfigurement,
men failed, men who are injured, men who are disabled. Yeah,
all of that. There is a greater toll on men paying with their bodies.
Yeah,
giving financially gestating children up to the level of adulthood. Yeah. There's a greater toll on men's bodies for that than there is on women's bodies for giving birth.
Yeah.
At least long term. And then you also can include all of the chronic stress related stuff, heart attacks.
One of the interesting things too is that actually having children reduces your health risks of, as a woman, of certain other types of health problems.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're less like, if you have children, you're less likely to get breast cancer, and you're less likely to have all kinds of other issues. Especially if you have children when you're in your prime reproductive years, rather than, when you're 40. So there you go.
Yeah.
All right, moving on.
That we should not be surprised to see this resistance, profound resistance, even from a minority.
But it's very much an unfinished battle, isn't it?
Well, yeah, because there's no abortion plex built, in Arizona, where, women are encouraged, they get like a little punch card, right? When they go in for their abortion and a haircut and getting their nails done and a little bit of shopping, because, hey, let's make it a spa-like experience, right? And when they go in and they get their abortion, they get a punch card that says every 10th abortion you have, you get the next one free, right? And because that's not applauded by society, woo, the more abortions, the better, right? The battle's not over. Because even people like me who are pro-choice do not have a blasé attitude about abortion.
Oh, why would you? It's unfortunate.
It's unfortunate, and it's, anybody who already has kids can tell you that there's a huge amount of sort of what if that goes into the decision. Because I'm really happy because I was done it too, and then I had Sam, and he was a surprise who I didn't learn about until I was 16 weeks along, right? When it was too late, right? So I didn't ever have to think about abortion. It was just not something that could happen at that point. But I still thought to myself, if I had known, 14 weeks ago, right? Or 13 weeks ago, would I have done that? And I thought, I have these two kids, and when you sort of look at it like every single human being on the face of the earth, if you believe in evolution, if you do not believe in God, if you do not believe in a higher power, right, then what you believe is that every single human being, along with every single organism on this planet, is the result of an unbroken line from the very first cyanobacteria, prokaryotic cyanobacteria, that sparked into existence by a bolt of lightning hitting some pool of primordial ooze, right? 3.5 billion years ago, right? You have to believe that every single generation from that cyanobacteria all the way up to you was successful, right? Every single one. And that's got to make you think, getting an abortion is actually, that's a big decision. It just is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's always going to be that way.
I think so. Whether you're religious or whether you're an atheist, I think that when that decision hits you, it's going to have repercussions, even if you maybe think it won't.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's.
Yes, absolutely. And, given the rest of your news that I've been sitting here listening to with interest, I think it's important to point out that we have always known that the polarization of gender roles was a mark of violence in tribal societies.
Actually, tribal societies are kind of inherently violent. Because they're trying, okay, moving on.
And now we can demonstrate in modern countries that the farther apart the gender roles, the more violence there is in society.
Wait, what?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. The more polarized the gender roles, the more violence there is in a society. There is a correlation there, but it has yet to be proved that is causal, right? You could just as easily say that in more violent societies, the gender roles tend to be more polarized. Why? Because women would want to be protected from that violence. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, well,
and men would want to protect them from that.
You gotta mute because you're doing the echoing thing again. All right, so here is the thing. In a society in which men are expected to treat themselves as expendable in service of acquiring the resources that their families need, and then that generally means a society that's more violent. Yeah, of course there's going to be a wider gender role, because men are expected to occupy the role of being expendable, and women are expected to occupy a role, a much more passive role, because the psychology is there. If you want men to treat themselves like they are expendable, you have to increase the chasm between the perception of their agency and the perception of women's agency. And the reason why is due to moral typecasting, which I've said repeatedly. Moral typecasting is how we tend to cast people into two categories: moral actors who do shit and moral patients who have shit done for them. If you want men, or to them. For them or to them. If you want men to occupy an extreme role of moral actor, you have to make women look more passive by comparison. And you can do that through social customs. You can do that through physical modifications. You can do that through legal imperatives. But if you want men to go out and be willing to kill themselves in service of getting resources, you got to do that. You got to train them to view themselves as being more agentative, which allows them to not care about their own internal suffering as much. It gives them a palliative. It's like shooting them up with fucking heroin and throwing them at a rhinoceros. All of this talk of being the head of the household or the lord of the manor. That's basically what it is. It enables men to treat themselves as expendable, and also enables the society around the men to treat them as expendable.
If you require men to behave in ways that allow women to be dependent on them, entirely dependent on them, you cannot give men the slightest inkling that women could be independent of them.
No, because then men will say, well, what the fuck? What the fuck? Yeah. And also, the other thing is that they will not have that psychological palliative, that ability to paste over their own pain. Which seeing yourself as the greatest agent in society allows men. It allows them to just say, "Oh, I could just tape it back on and keep going." That's what it does.
I would just fucking totally just like snap punch that dude, and then I'd fucking lay him out and blah 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 blah. Right? I would be able to handle that situation. Right? This is sort of the thing that a lot of guys say about certain things. You see it in comment threads on YouTube, viral videos all the time. Oh, if I were that guy, I would have just, done such and such and prevented that beating that guy got, right?
Probably, to be honest, probably not. But but it allows men to occupy the role of agent and expendable without fucking well, they do still commit suicide, but not at 100% rate. Because if you do that, if you insist that men occupy an expendable role in society and simultaneously say, no, women are just as agentive as you're just a piece of shit we don't care about, guess what's going to happen? We just don't care because, men are basically human fucking flatulence or human fucking excrement we just want it flush it as quick as fucking possible as a society. What do you think's going to fucking happen? If you simultaneously treat men as expendable and don't give them any kind of honor to hang on to, any kind of machismo, any kind of way of saying, well, maybe I'm expendable, but that's because I'm tough. That's because I can do it better. You don't give them that. What are you going to get? You're going to get generations of suicide.
Yeah, no, I'm going to sacrifice for my family, but they're mine. Right? I'm going to sacrifice for my family, but they're mine. And I'm coming home to them every night. And I get to see my kids, and I get to have a wife, and I get to have this life that's mine. And then you take all of that away, and in its place, you put a hideously unreasonable child support obligation, life sleeping in a bachelor suite on a futon, if you're lucky, if you're not sleeping in your car, right? And a woman who's calling all the shots, the woman that you pledged to love forever, right? Until she fucking booted you out, right? And she gets to determine whether you see your kids or not. And the courts won't enforce that because the courts are like, well, why would a man take a woman to court for access to his kids? It's obviously, like the feminists tell us, because he's an abuser who just wants to make life difficult for her, right? Or it's obviously he wants more custody of the kids and more time with them to get out of paying that completely egregious child support payment, right? Those are the only reasons why he would want that, right? And nobody even thinks that it was the promise of those things, right? The promise of having children that you actually get to see, you actually get to be involved with, and you actually get to see them grow up and become proud of them and participate in that and contribute to that in a meaningful way. And you get to hug them at night, and you get to help them learn how to brush their teeth and all of that shit, right? That was part of why men were willing to pay that egregious amount of money that cost them, an early death from stress or injury on the job or all of those other things, right? It was the promise of that kept men doing that. And when you remove that promise, and then when they don't live up to the egregious amount of sacrifice, right, then you call them deadbeats and put them in jail. Oh my goodness. And suddenly, for some insane reason, for some completely insane reason that nobody could have foreseen, men are starting to think that that's a shitty deal. I can't imagine why. Anyhow. Yeah. All right. We're moving on.
And it really is, in its fundament, about controlling women's bodies.
Oh, shut up! It's not in its fundament about controlling women.
Oh, the fundament thing. Someone mentioned on your channel that fundament actually refers to the buttocks. So apparently she's concerned about patriarchy controlling her buttocks.
Okay. Maybe she was anally raped once or something, and that's her major concern. But
or maybe she's worried that they're going to insert a mind control chip into her anus.
Maybe. But yeah, no, it's never been about controlling women's bodies. That's not the reason for all of this. It isn't even necessarily about controlling reproduction. What it has been about is the difference between the biological difference between motherhood and fatherhood and the assignment of responsibility. A baby comes out of a woman's vagina, there's a mother, right? She's a mother, right? A baby comes out of a woman's vagina. Who's the father? Who do we hold responsible for this? And the only way up until DNA testing, right, to even ascertain that has been through controlling reproduction on the part of both sexes, controlling the bodies of both sexes, prohibiting sex outside of marriage for both sexes. It wasn't about controlling women's bodies. It was about being able to justly hold a given man responsible for what a woman's body produced. That's what it was about. I'm going to just take a minute here.
Yeah, your bitch needs to be tended to.
My bitch is fucking pissing me off. Come here, Doug.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. Yeah. She completely ignores the fact that societies in the past, and I think they still do to men, they don't just control women's reproduction, because women giving birth doesn't create a viable member of a society. It also takes the resources to get the creation of the womb to the point of reproductive age itself, which requires men. So you could look at it as the woman having a womb and the man having the financial womb or the social womb that completes the gestation of a viable offspring. And society has controlled both throughout history.
One of the things, in
fact, even been more brutal towards men. And it still is more brutal about controlling men's reproductive material, reproductive resources. It's more brutal about it. There is no society on earth in which women are punished more harshly than men for sexual indiscretion or adultery. No society. Most societies, they will sew a red letter on a woman's dress and they'll fucking whip a man for adultery. They'll whip a woman and they'll hang a man. And there are some societies where the punishments are relatively equal, although we don't know if women actually get the same level of punishment as men.
They don't get it as often.
They don't get it as often. So yeah, because in the Middle East, where women are being stoned for adultery, read the actual stories, because in the fine print, you'll also find the man being stoned for adultery.
Yep.
Because there are no societies in which women are punished more for sexual indiscretions than men, but there are plenty of societies where men are punished more for sexual indiscretions because men are fucking expendable.
Well, what I thought was interesting is that during the exact same time that using a vibrator to manually masturbate a woman was seen as a cure for hysteria, right? You could buy from the Sears catalog a anti-masturbatory device to strap on your 10-year-old boy's genitals that would cause, metal spikes to poke into his penis every time he got an erection.
Yeah, the idea was that masturbating women was a cure for all kinds of ailments of the mind. But men masturbating was a disease that needed to be eradicated.
Yeah, it created criminally deviant men.
Yeah, it was responsible for miscegenation and homosexuality and prostitution. So let's chop off parts of men's genitals to prevent all of that shit.
Yeah, and then we'll strap freaking medieval torture device to our freaking prepubescent boys to keep them from fucking enjoying their wet dreams. Yeah.
Yeah. But men are privileged.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's listen to
it's
more.
All about controlling women's bodies. There is not a single culture out there that practices female genital mutilation that does not also practice male genital mutilation, and more often. And with in more cases where it's male genital mutilation is more prevalent, even in societies where female genital mutilation is practiced, right? Mm-hmm. And oftentimes it's more invasive. You look at female genital mutilation in certain societies, they scrape a little bit of skin off the hood of the clitoris. They don't even cut the hood of the clitoris. They scrape a little skin off of it and it's done, right? Honor has been served, right? When you look at the same practices in those cultures, pretty much usually at the same age, for boys, it's the entire amputation of the foreskin. It's not a ritual scraping. Yeah. And it's every boy, as opposed to, some girls. Not all girls.
Someone said in the little chat that there's never been an unequivocally matriarchal society, according to anthropologists. Well, you know what? I'm gonna take a page from the feminism book. Anthropologists look at power through a male lens. I would argue that looking at men at the top of a society, still called top of a society, is like looking at men comprise the mechanism. They are the machine of society. And the men on the top of the society they're basically the steering wheel of society. Well, they're the steering wheel of society, but you still need someone to steer it.
Yeah.
And that's where the matriarchy comes in, or what, if you want to call it that.
Isn't necessarily what women say they want, but it is whatever services their needs. And well, here's the thing, right? If you actually look at it, look at all of the different types of arrangements among sexually dimorphic species, right? You got the patrilineal matriarch, or the matrilineal patriarchy, right? Of the mountain gorilla, right? Where the children all belong to the females. The patriarch is in charge and dominates reproduction, and keeps all other males away. And all of the females are essentially single mothers, and they're not just single mothers. They're what we would consider to be single mothers without welfare, on their own, right? Essentially, there's no food sharing that goes on. There's no provisioning that really goes on. Occasionally, the male will take over childcare duties if the mother has died and if the juvenile is old enough to be somewhat independent, and do that on a case-by-case basis sometimes, right? In chimpanzees, you have the same thing, a matrilineal patriarchy, where the males sort of control access to sex and the females are all single mothers without even a welfare state to help them, right? And there's very little food sharing, and the only food sharing that happens is from males that don't have reproductive opportunities, right? So that they can try and get them. And then you have humans, which, if you look at these sort of the formal structure of society, would be considered a patrilineal patriarchy. Can anybody tell me where else that's ever occurred in nature? A patrilineal patriarchy, a society that is male dominant, right? And where the bloodline, where heredity is traced through the male line. Now, human society and human social organization and human sexual organization is not just unique, but uniquely unique in nature, right? What if that system of patrilineal patriarchy is why we're not still digging grubs out of rotten logs with fence sticks?
No, we still have to oppose it because it gives men something, even if it gives women more. All right, let's listen to this thing because I want to eat.
Okay, me too.
In order to control reproduction and to perpetuate racism and particular religions.
Well, if you look at the violence...
Okay, all right. This is why we named this. How, and we said this multiple times, you watch a well-connected, wealthy white woman, and at some point during her screed, she will appropriate the victimhood of other groups of people, other minorities, period, because she's not a minority. Gloria Steinem is not a minority, nor does she represent any kind of disenfranchised group ever. But because of her political power, because of her political connections, because she has the power that white women, white wealthy or well-connected, politically connected women have, she can do this. She can appropriate the victimhood of other groups of people to her own ends. And she can get on these, you don't see a Black Lives Matter protester on here. Well, maybe you do, but not with the same connections as Gloria Steinem. And she is doing this, and she is like a colonizer. She is appropriating. Karen called it cultural appropriation. She's appropriating the oppression of other groups to append to herself, to give herself moral authority. And she can do that because she is in power.
Well, and you know what's amazing is, like, this is not new among feminism. When you had post-abolitionist, the post-abolitionist suffrage movement, suffragette movement, there were a lot of suffragettes who talked about how women were essentially, they were now the Negroes of society. Now that slaves, black slaves, had been liberated from the shackles of slavery, even though, you know, they were still looking at all kinds of institutional and legal biases, and, you know, their lives were still worth like 2/3 of a white person's and all of these things, right? And they didn't get anything in return for that. It's not like, you know, their slave master could be hanged in their stead or anything like that when they, you know, raped a white woman or something like that, or when they were accused of raping a white woman. You know, they didn't get anything in return, but suffragettes appropriated this sort of tribal dynamic that's completely different from sexism, that comes up through completely different evolutionary mechanisms, in order to appropriate the title of the new slave class, the new Negro, right? Women are the new Negro, right? Slaves have been liberated, women have not. And women's experience, right, under this subjugation is equivalent to the subjugation, the experience of subjugation that slaves had under the slave system of the US, which was extremely unstable because it was so incredibly fucked up, right?
Yeah. The other thing I'd like them to point to where in the history of American history, women like Gloria Steinem were lynched for having raped a white woman or white man.
Yeah, or a black man.
Or a black man. I'd like them to point to that, to say that there was any kind of legal or social equivalent going on.
Yeah, or an 11-year-old boy.
Yeah. So it's, you find that, Gloria, and then you can appropriate that. Until that time, until you actually look at the legal realities, because yes, there were, and under coverture, there, I just learned today, there a woman could be convicted of or charged with petty treason if she killed her husband, and in a conjunction with murder. But how many women were actually charged with the crime compared to men if they killed their spouse? How many?
How many were charged? How many were? What was the likelihood of being charged? What was the likelihood of being convicted? And
what were the sentences?
What were the actual sentences? Because, you know, you can have a crime that carries a sentence of death, right? And the judge or the jury will say, yeah, no, we're not going to apply that. We're not going to apply that in this case, right? You have to actually, you can't, and the woman who actually made the video, which is a very interesting video, and I would recommend it to anybody, and I'll leave the link in the low bar of the ad for this if I remember to do it after the thing. She said you can't just look at the laws. You have to actually look at the entire context, because cultures decide whether or not they're going to actually enforce laws.
And
right?
the particular,
to the extent that they can.
The particular movie that or video that Karen is referring to is Feminism and the Angel in the House by Vanessa D. Fisher. And the other thing is that I would like to know, you'd really have to do a study of how the laws were applied, because I know not a generation after coverture, there was a one woman attorney or feminist or suffragette or something who was arguing that they should just stop trying to charge women with murder, because nobody stop wasting the court's time with trying to charge any particular woman with murder, because no jury would convict them. So a generation later, if it wasn't even possible for people or for a jury or a lawyer to get a conviction of murder when the defendant was a woman, I would imagine that the likelihood that there was a greater likelihood of men being charged with the murder of their wife and spending time in jail relative to women. And you'd have to really look at the situation before you could determine it. Yeah.
And like the thing too is, you know, like you look at a musical like Chicago, and that song, He Had It Coming. And it really was sort of that one verse where she's talking about how the reason she did him in, right? The reason she killed him was because he chewed his gum noisily, right? He had it coming. And that's probably the only woman in the movie who really would have stood a reasonable chance of being convicted of murdering a man. If a woman had any justification whatsoever, he broke my heart, he disappointed me, he cheated on me, he was mean to me, right? He broke off our engagement, right? So I shot him in the stomach 3 times. She would be acquitted by typically by an all-male jury. And it wasn't just a feminist who was proposing this. This was actually a national conversation going on in the opinion editorial sections of several major newspapers in I think it was the 1920s, right? Should we just give women amnesty when they kill men? Because, and one of the articles on it ended on a point of praise for women. It should be noted that given how easily women could get away with it, it speaks to the better nature of women, the moral nature of women, that so few women do this. And of course it might, but they had to end on a praising of femininity.
Because white slave owners could get away with murdering the obstinate Negro. It's a testament to the forbearance and the moral superiority of the white slave owner that he doesn't do that.
Yeah. And it's also that essentially it just that white slave owner, his likelihood of conviction, right, was just so high compared to the likelihood of conviction of a black slave of any given crime.
Okay, let's continue with this.
Women now, the millions subjected to female genital mutilation.
And what about the millions of men? No, that doesn't fucking matter. Of course
actually, not. The billion men.
Billion men.
A billion men. A billion men. Actually, no. A billion boys between the ages of a few days old and usually maybe 15.
Well, I mean, and the thing is that feminists will say, but it's just a flap of skin. Well, so are the labia. But you complain about labiaplasty, and you sure as hell, like, what are you saying? That that women who, not only do you complain about this completely elective surgery on women's labia, it's not like those women are getting it done without anesthetic.
Yeah.
They're not getting it done without anesthetic like the boys who are being circumcised, the vast majority of the boys who are being circumcised.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Anesthetic.
God, like it's just women. And what about those anti-masturbatory devices you could buy for your boy 100 years ago?
Millions of girls married before they're 18, and the millions.
Millions of girls married before they're 18, and lots of boys married before they're 18. And with arranged marriages, it's not only the girl that often doesn't really have a choice, or the woman, right? It's often the boy, the man, who also doesn't have a choice. His parents are dictating who he can and can't marry. In fact, in India right now, a lot of the rape cases that come across the desks of investigators are due to men and women who are single, who engage in consensual sex, and he wants to marry her, and his parents won't give him permission. And so she wants to marry him, so she brings a rape charge to coerce the parents to give permission for the guy to marry her. Of course, in 10 years, feminists will look at those cases and they'll be saying, 10 years ago in India, women were forced to marry their rapists.
Sexually assaulted. Do you think that successive generations of feminists have even bigger battles to fight than you did?
This is like the eternal revolution. It's
I know. I can actually vaguely hear the feed as Steinem is actually hearing it.
Okay, let's hear Steinem's answer to the belief that.
I don't know, but it is all about controlling the means of production. I mean, it even sounds radical, right?
I know. Child support isn't a way of controlling the means of production, and shotgun weddings were never about controlling the means of production, and giving men the perks of being the head of their household was never about controlling the means of production, and all of these norms that coerce men into forms of masculinity that often are detrimental to them. That was never about controlling the means of production.
Well, who is producing in this equation? Because it seems like it's more likely to be men than women, or unless she's talking about reproduction.
I think that's what she's talking about, the means of production of babies, right? Okay, so we live in a society right now where, like, a lot of the rhetoric is around how the world is overpopulated and we need to reduce population, and I think that that's foolish and short-sighted myself. But wouldn't, like, making abortions as easy to get as a haircut be a means of controlling reproduction? And
reverse controlling means of production. You're controlling who necessarily has access, or you're controlling who has because children need resources. So by controlling how many children you have, you control how much resources can be. Let's just continue. Let's see what she's going with it.
In control of the means of reproduction, and we are. I do know that at this moment in time, for the first time that we're aware of, there is so much violence against females.
Oh my God.
Jesus fucking, no, there isn't!
Violence worldwide has gone down. The murder rate in London 300 years ago was 30 times what it is now. That's just the murder rate, right? Domestic violence has gone down. Oh, rape has been on a steady decline in the US since the 1980s, actually since the advent of VCRs in particular, and the internet. Everything is going down, and yet you're saying that it's at, like, higher than ever levels. Violence against women is at higher than ever levels. Have you ever wondered what it's like to be a boy or a man? Like, have you ever, when you're preaching your 1 in 3 women will be assaulted or raped worldwide, right, in their lifetimes, have you ever considered that number for men is 1 in 1? It's 1 in 1. It's been 1 in 1 for all of human history, and it will remain 1 in 1 for some time, even as rates of violence go down, even as rates of incidents of violence go down. You will still see this lag, because, that 1 in 1 300 years ago represented, 100 or 500 incidents over a lifetime, right? And now it represents maybe 5, right? Incidents of getting beaten up, getting pushed down, right? Getting like shoved into a locker, whatever, right? Getting hit by your wife, right? All of those things that happen to men that nobody seems to care about, right? Maybe 5 times now compared to 500 times per men's lifetime 500 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's still 1 in 1, and it will be 1 in 1 for the foreseeable future. It's 1 in 3. Do you not realize that means 2 out of 3 women over their entire lifetimes will never be shoved against a wall, will never be slapped, will never be mugged, will never be raped, will never be anything by anyone.
Not even street harassed. That's like 2/3 of women will have a life that
entirely free of violence. Globally.
Entirely free of violence. 2/3 of women will have a life of such incredible sheltered privilege. Wow, we're doing fantastic. What a surprise that this woman, whose only relevancy is manufacturing female victimhood, has found that the only thing that makes her relevant is still relevant. Such a coincidence.
I know, isn't it though? But that's because now making eye contact with a woman in public for more than 7 or 8 seconds in a way that makes her feel uncomfortable is described as violence. and also us calling her a cunt in this video, and I'm sorry, Gloria, you're a cunt, that's also violence.
Yes, we're being horribly violent towards you. But the thing is that all of the government-sponsored propaganda painting men as aggressors, I mean, we would recognize this as a horrible, dehumanizing propaganda campaign if it was directed against Black men only and Jewish men only. We'd recognize all of this, name the problem, and you have to stand up in school assembly and take pledges never to hurt a woman or girl, or I don't know, domestic violence wears a man's face, or don't be that guy shit. We would recognize it. If it was directed against any minority group of men, we would recognize it as hate speech. But because it's directed at all men, we have government-sanctioned fucking hate speech that nobody calls out but us. And that doesn't count in the violence statistics. But a woman being called cunt on the internet for being a fucking cunt is violence.
Yeah, no, and you know what? If she puts a Google alert on her name, right, and that leads her to this video and she watches it, she can accuse us of harassment too.
And stalking her.
We were directing communication at her.
All right. Let's finish this off because I have tacos awaiting.
Why? Including a preference for sons, including domestic violence.
Oh, why? Why do you think people would prefer sons? Why do you think people who would really love to have a diamond but could more readily use a shovel, right? So they would love to have a $1,000 diamond, but what they really need is a $10 shovel, right? Would prefer a boy.
They prefer boys the same way a farmer prefers a strong fucking ox, lady. They don't prefer them because they value boys. They value boys' production. They don't value the boys. They value their production. That's the only value that boys have over girls, is the fact that they produce, that they net produce in a society. And that girls tend to produce mouths that need to be fed.
Yeah, and you know what's really hilarious is feminists have done everything in their power over the last 30 or 40 years, actually maybe 50, to completely undermine men's ability to be productive, to completely undermine the sole way, the sole means by which men can prove themselves worth society's care and concern. Right? This is the only way they've ever been able to justify their existence, right? And feminists, right, by prioritizing women in education, by prioritizing them at work, right, affirmative action, all of that, they have handicapped men in their ability to harness the compassion of society. And the only way that they have been able to harness the compassion of society has been, please don't shoot me, I have a wife and family. That's it. That's what men.
I know, and then they're handicapped and they need not fucking challenge the social systems that make it so that men can't have compassion on their own. They don't challenge that shit.
Now a man who says, please don't shoot, I have a wife and family, okay? The highwayman is going to say, so what you're saying is you're a patriarchal oppressor who feels like he's entitled to a woman's body, right? Probably rapes his wife, treats her like shit, doesn't allow her to succeed in the workplace, and is probably abusing his kids. Bam.
All right.
Violence in my own country, which is frequent. The result is...
Back up a bit, back up.
Frequent.
Oh.
The result...
Back up a little bit further, like about 10 seconds there. Yeah, good.
There's so much violence against females worldwide, including a preference for sons, including domestic violence in my own country, which is frequent. The result is
frequent against men and women. No, I wouldn't even say it's frequent.
And
I would
also,
well, okay, you have to talk about it in the context of domestic violence. You have to talk about it in the context of breaking it down. common couple violence is actually quite frequent. And I'm sorry, but a push here, a slap there that never gets repeated because you're having like a massive, huge upheaval or conflict, right? And everybody's emotions are running high, and she slaps the guy and he shoves her out of the way and storms out of the house. I don't think that is the domestic violence that feminists would like us to believe. I don't think that requires criminal redress. I don't think it requires anything other than maybe counseling, because in most of those cases, they de-escalate over time or they disappear altogether as the external stressors or conflict.
Oh shit, you're breaking up there, Karen. I'm gonna go forward now. All right.
Okay.
You, Gloria Steinem, you're saying that things are worse now. You realize in the 70s, the reason why there are proportionately more women who die of domestic or killed by their spouses. In the 70s, it was near parity. So as many men were being killed by their wives or spouses as women were being killed by their husbands. In the last 40 years, the number of men being killed, for whatever reason, it may not actually be the number of men being killed, the number of men reported being killed by their wives has declined. And that's the only reason why only one in three spousal murders is of a husband, is because since the 70s, it has declined. The number of men being murdered by their wives has declined. And the number of women having been murdered by their husbands has stayed roughly the same. That's the only reason why you now have this feminist talking point, is because during the time of feminism, the number of men being murdered who are reported, it may be that men are still murdered at the same rate, but they're no longer being reported as often. The number of men being reported having been murdered by their wives has gone down, while the number of women reported having been murdered by their husbands has stayed the same. That's it. And that's during the time feminism has been prominent.
Okay, but also look at it this way, okay? Because if we're going to take into consideration the burning bed phenomenon, I'm sure we all remember that Lifetime movie or whatever the fuck it was, starring, I think, Farrah Fawcett or something back in the early 1980s, right? Battered women's syndrome, right? You have battered women's syndrome. You have a woman who sees no way out. You have a woman who literally sees no way out. And maybe there are ways out, but she just doesn't see them. She does not perceive them. She is being abused systematically, just absolutely without cease, right? By her partner, right? And I think even if that particular case might be questionable, because I haven't looked into it, but I'm sure there are cases like this that exist out there in the world, because there's fucked up people of both sexes. There just is, right? And she sees her only way out as killing her spouse, right? Her only way to get free of him is to kill him. Now she has shelters, and she has protections. She has restraining orders that she can acquire in 3 minutes. She has all kinds of recourse. She can report it to the police and he'll be put in jail. If the abuse is extremely egregious, he can be put in jail for a very, very, very long time, right? All of this is all of these measures now to get out without killing her partner. But guess who doesn't? Guess who doesn't if he finds himself in that situation with a systematically, egregiously abusive, controlling partner, particularly if he has kids? Because not only does he not have a shelter to go to, but because he doesn't have a shelter to go to, even just to apply, even if it's full and has a waiting list, to put himself on the waiting list, okay, here's what happens. When he goes to the government to ask for financial assistance, when he tries to escape his situation, the government tells him, yeah, no, you don't get benefits because you've intentionally made yourself homeless. And we don't help people who intentionally make themselves homeless. So your only choice, if you want a roof over your head, is to go back to your partner, right? And if he reports her, right, he has twice the likelihood of being arrested than she does.
So he's basically fucked. So fuck you, Gloria. Fuck you. There are tacos waiting for me. Tacos. I can see them on the counter.
Okay. All right. Let's.
The result is that there are actually now fewer females on Earth than males. And
yes.
No, there isn't.
No, I think
Blackface fucking lie.
There may be fewer females being born, and I know that there are fewer females in China and India. But that's also the result of extremely of the way those societies exploit boys and men.
Yeah. You know, if you could neuter your daughters at birth and turn them into oxen, they would probably do that.
Yeah.
We don't know that that has happened before. We have to really look at this as part of every issue. The women's movement, no social justice movement, should be viewed as a silo by itself. All these
Okay,
things.
so there once again, appropriation. Everything should accrue to the wealthy, well-connected white woman who can use the poor and colored people's problems to their maximum effect to control society. That's what she's doing. She's like, just a fucking colonialist going in and saying, here's a bunch of blue beads. Let me take your land is meaningless to you. I'll just write on this little deed that I own this shit. But that doesn't mean anything to you. Here's some blue beads. Oh, great. And they don't fucking, she's like, take those fucking blue beads, Gloria Steinem, and shove them up your ass.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think
fundament.
Well, like most feminists, she does not have an understanding. Fundamentally, she does not have an understanding of exactly what is entirely going on. She thinks that sex selective abortion in China and India is because people just like boys more than they like girls there, right? And that's because of misogyny. When in reality, it's often because of female privilege backfiring. I mean, and part of that is the way that societies organize themselves in ways that favor men in some ways and women in other ways, right? But when the ways that society favors men
favors mothers,
well, by the way that when the ways that society favors men become absolutely necessary. So when labor, right? And the ability to actually commandeer that labor on the part of parents, right? So parents who have a daughter in a place like India or China, her daughter's going to leave, join some other family, right? And the sons are the ones who are going to stay and take care of them in their old age, and the productivity of the son is actually going to stay within the family. And this is one of the fundamental principles of our human social organization that has essentially allowed, in my opinion, drywall to be invented and alternating current and all kinds of other shit. It's because organizing society in such a way that the males, related males tend to stay together, right? And it's the females who leave the nest and go and incorporate themselves into another family. That's actually what facilitates the male cooperation that allows big, massive things to happen, right? So essentially what she's saying is that the ways men are exploited, right, for their productivity, because they reward males in some ways, they're actually privileged, and the ways females are privileged over males or are not exploitable by their parents, that actually oppresses women.
Yeah,
right?
but feminists is exploiting us and removing our public perception of women's agency in order to exploit us as fucking victim resources. That's not exploitation.
No, it's not.
Okay, all right. This woman is standing between me and the delicious tacos that my husband made me to eat. That's why I have so much rage, and I really want to finish this. I want those fucking tacos.
The landscape for women is changing, though, isn't it? And you also have changed. You've apologized for once saying of trans people that they surgically mutilated their own bodies. Do you think that Germaine Greer should also apologize for saying that having an op doesn't make a trans woman a woman?
Wait a second. And Germaine Greer shouldn't shouldn't apologize for obvious fetishism of adolescent male sexuality.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh no.
No, treating boys like a sexual convenience, that's okay.
I know, and that's particularly interesting in light of her commentary on how dads who read bedtime stories to their daughters and kiss them goodnight are being sexualized, or are sexualizing their daughters and teaching their daughters to sexualize themselves. So, I mean, it's yeah, Germaine Greer shouldn't apologize for any of that. And, you know, interestingly enough, because I think it was Germaine Greer who was asked to debate Milo Yiannopoulos over trans issues or something like that at a university in, it was an uncomfortable topics talk or something like that at a university in the UK. And they were both banned for, oh wait, no, it was Julie Bindel, not Germaine Greer. They were both banned for transphobia. Only Julie Bindel said that it wasn't transphobia at all that got her banned. It was just garden variety misogyny and trying to silence women's voices. That was why she was banned from that debate. Germaine Greer was banned from a speech at another freaking university in the UK, if I remember correctly, in part because of her transphobic comments and stuff like that. Personally, I don't think that these women should be forced to apologize for any of that. I think that they're wrong, but I think it's their opinion, and people should be able to just say, well, you know, your opinion is fucking stupid.
Yeah, your opinion is fucking stupid. And just to speak about the taco gap, to be honest, there still is a significant taco gap, because I watched my husband eat the tacos that he made, and I didn't get my half of my those.
He ate them right in front of you. He ate them right in front of you. That fucking edgelord.
No, actually, he ate in another room so he wouldn't make noise. But he still was eating those fucking tacos, and because he made that resource, because he made it, and I didn't get fucking half of it, there is a goddamn taco gap, and it is pressing women right now. Right now.
Yeah, I know. It is.
Taco gap.
All right, let's move on then, so you can get to your tacos. You seem really hungry, Alison. Are you going to go
to the bathroom?
Okay. All right. I'm gonna play a little bit, and then I'll pause it when I choose.
No, I mean, I think, you know, I don't know what the context was, but I think that each person has a right to define themselves. And in my case, what I was always saying and continue to say is that we need to change society to suit the individual, not the individual to suit society.
Yeah, except for, here's the thing, is that it's not necessarily society, right? Because there is actually a structure in the brain that in trans women looks like a woman's, and in trans men looks like a man's, and functions that way too, right? So it isn't just about society, Gloria. It isn't. Sometimes it's actually about biological aspects of people's phenotypical morphology, right, that affect their identity.
Yeah, but okay, what if she's talking about individual not being? Well, what about men having reproductive freedoms?
Yeah,
or are men not individuals?
No. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here, Alison.
Oh, let's not get too excited.
Okay. As long as there is some young woman somewhere in the hills of Tibet whose genitals have been mutilated, we're just going to table the discussion of male reproductive rights until the day that is no longer the case.
I just realized something. What she's returning society, generally it is about making sure that men's bodily financial resources go to the production of offspring. That's generally what society revolves around. How to most effectively make sure channel men's resources to the production of healthy offspring. Men's physical resources to the production of healthy offspring. That is subjugating individual men to the aims of society. So, and I assume that she doesn't believe that men should have the right to say, "Hey, I don't want to have a kid. Goodbye. That's your business, lady. You choose it. You pay for it." I assume that she's you broke it. You bought it. I assume that she doesn't believe that. So she, in essence, in this talk about individuality, because I guarantee she believes that men should bankroll women's reproductive decisions, is that she wants to go from society enforcing men's resources to women, society, for the benefit of society as a whole. So there are some limitations on women in this whole thing, to just having women be the ones who are directly benefited, directly served by men's physical resources.
Men's resources go to society for the benefit of women, instead of men's resources going to women for the benefit of society.
Yeah. Well, that's a fucking change. But no, I don't think she does want to facilitate individual reproductive choices. I just don't want to open that fucking can of worms, right?
No.
Or just not going to classify men as individuals, whatever. They're part of the hegemonic masculinity hive mind.
No, they're instead of testicles. They all they think about is how to oppress women today. And how to control women's bodies and all of that shit. Never mind the fact that more women than men in the U.S. are pro-life.
We aren't there yet, but so we must support the individual choice and self-definition, but we have to keep fighting to change society.
No, we don't.
What?
Honestly, what she's getting at, right, is that if we change society enough, trans people won't be trans people. That's essentially what I got from her argument. If we change society enough, trans people will not be trans people. And I'm sorry, but when you have such a fundamental issue with structures, with biological structures within the brains of trans people, right? And it really is like a software and it's like a hardware compatibility issue, right? You plug a freaking webcam into a Mac that wasn't designed for it. It's not going to work right. And sometimes it's easier with our medical technology, it's easier to retrofit the system to accommodate the part that's not quite, that's incompatible, right, than it is to swap out the incompatible part, right? Just like it's a lot easier to do a heart transplant than a brain transplant. You can't do a brain transplant. And if you do a brain transplant, you're actually not doing a brain transplant, you're doing a body transplant.
I gotcha. All right, mute. Mute. Wait,
okay.
we got 10 seconds left. Let's see what's in that last 10 seconds.
I don't think there's anything in that last 10 seconds.
All right.
Okay.
Well, let's just make sure. We don't want to be accused of fucking cherry picking.
Subscribe.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Well, actually, don't subscribe to us if you enjoy the Rantzerking. Well, that was fuck. I want to get to my tacos.
Let me stop sharing. There we go.
Yeah, I'll just fucking present this to everyone. Yeah, just that was just like a whole bunch of butt fuck nothing.
Oh, it's just, and I still can't get over how joyless she seems. Right? Maybe it's because she never did have kids. And wouldn't that be horrible? Wouldn't that be horrible if she's like every night she goes to bed and she thinks, if only I'd had kids, but I can't dare say it ever publicly because it would undermine my credibility as a feminist. Wouldn't that be horrible?
Well, she's obviously a while back, feminists said that doing feminism isn't going to make you happy as a woman. I mean, why the fuck would you do it if it doesn't make you if it doesn't actually appreciably improve your fucking life? So maybe that's why she's joyless, because she's a feminist, because they've actually recognized that women who are less happy now than they were, possibly due to feminism. And but feminists say that's okay, because social justice, it shouldn't make the people that they supposedly are making their lives better. They shouldn't actually make your life better, even if you're a woman.
No.
Well, I'm actually.
here's the thing too, right? Like, because it was Gloria Steinem that I saw in an interview from about 7-8 years ago, saying that, you know, someone asked her, are women still oppressed? And she said, oh, more than ever, right? And then when the interviewer asked her, okay, in what ways? She started listing off a bunch of the results of feminism. Oh, well, now they have to juggle career and family, and now they feel the burden of being breadwinners, and now blah, 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 blah. And the solution, more feminism. Well, you know, honestly,
it's a never revolution.
Yeah, if this stuff that feminism brought about is actually making women more oppressed, according to a feminist, right? Then, like, why should we fucking be taking these women seriously? What are they doing to facilitate women's happiness? They're certainly not doing anything to facilitate men's happiness. But like, what are they doing to make women's lives better?
Obviously nothing. Well, I would say that treating women like they are victims of everything will make women's lives worse. This will definitely make women's lives worse, because they live under a constant, like a heap of bricks that they have to carry around, lug around, of being oppressed, being victims of shit. Oh yeah, no,
like, it's hilarious because women are not only victims of reproduction, right? Because they get pregnant, but they're also victims if an abortion is harder to get than or more expensive or difficult to. And they're also victims of the fact that the government won't pay for their birth control or force their companies, their employers, to pay for it, right? They're victims of their own autonomous decisions, right? So when a woman makes all that string of unilateral decisions and chooses to become a mother, she's a victim of the man's reluctance to step up and pay for it, right? I mean, if women are victims of their own choices that have been brought about, that have been made possible specifically to make them stop being victims, right? Then where do you even go from there?
It's a perpetual revolution. Revolution
of victimhood.
Yeah, it's a cult of victimhood, and it's
like the juice is rapidly not becoming not quite worth the squeeze.
when was it ever worth the fucking squeeze? Like,
oh
really.
God!
But this is, in my mind, this is how they've managed to maintain that moral sense of superiority without actually having to have the trappings of being the quote unquote weaker gender. So they can just be the weaker gender by being the victimized gender. And that's how that women get to maintain their political power as the moralizers of society, or wealthy white women generally.
Yes. You know, if women aren't in power because they're weak or they're not as ambitious or whatever, then that's sexist and it's a horrible assumption, right? But if they're not in power because they're victimized, right, then it's an external cause. It's not something inherent to women, right? And therefore, it's just a clarion call for more feminism, right?
Yeah, and obviously, see, it's basically the eternal revolution because it's maintaining the status quo. Wrap your minds around that. Well, anyway, I want to get to my fucking tacos, so it's time for the e-begging.
For the e-begging.
Yes, it's time.
Send us the cash.
Yeah, put the shekels. Give us the shekels. Give it to us.
Give us the shekels.
So we can continue to rant with aplomb, because it seems like we are some of the few people who are willing to call people like Gloria Steinem to the mat and say, "Fucking shut up, shut the fuck up, shut up, shut it."
Maybe we were fun. Maybe at its fundament, we just kind of got things wrong.
Yeah, at your fundament. Maybe
your whole life has probably been wasted.
Yeah,
right?
Most likely, Gloria, you've wasted it, and you've been thinking from your fundament a lot.
No, I'm pulling things out of your fundament,
examining the things you pull out of your fundament.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, please do consider becoming a patron. www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. There are perks that are pretty nice. Like, for example, patrons will be talking to us later on when we close this off and I eat my tacos. They're going to be talking to us for a bit because
And
they're
when
patrons.
I cook they can listen to me cook my wieners and beans.
Yeah, they're going to listen to Karen cook her wieners and beans. And if you would like those kind of perks, do consider becoming a patron. And be careful though when you do, because patron is per episode. So you'll want to set a monthly max that you can manage, not just go in and set $68 per episode and then freak out when you find out it actually is $68 per episode, which did happen. And I actually informed him. I was like, I usually put more episodes through on Sundays, but I'm just putting one through. Are you sure you want to put 60? And then he dropped it down to 50 cents per episode, which is fine because I want people to pay what they can afford. Because I really don't want them screaming at the end of the month. My God,
Yeah, well, it's not even that we don't want them screaming. We don't want them like struggling to pay for it.
Yeah, we don't want them struggling to pay their mortgage. So go there, look at the perks. Make sure you pledge per episode. $1 an episode really helps out. $5 an episode, that's really awesome. Make sure you put your monthly max, and depending on the monthly max, you're entitled to certain perks. So go there and pledge. www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. What were you going to say, Karen?
Or be square, like Sir Winston Churchill.
Give us the shekels.